Hello, this is the CYF Employee Spotlight. I'm Erica McKeever, and today we're going to talk to Laura Taylor. And Laura Taylor's the Newborn Screening Follow-Up Coordinator.
I think everybody that knows me knows that I love animals, and I wanted to show that my affinity for animals started pretty young.
See the resemblance?
Yeah, see the resemblance. This is probably my favorite picture of all of my pictures. I'm 17 in this picture, and I'm with my 3 dogs. This is Valentine, my pug. You can't see him very well. This is my black dachshund, Max, and this is my Irish wolfhound, Irsa. And her head is, under my arm. And I think we can all agree that's a gigantic dog butt. These guys, we were like the 4 musketeers, and we were always together. And for a significant portion of that time, I slept on a little daybed mattress on the floor that was about as wide as me, with no extra, and not nearly as wide as the twin bed. And all 3 of them had to be on the bed with me. And poor Irsa, she could only get like a paw or her head, but she had to have some body part on the bed with me. This is my baby now, Milo. And this was when I first adopted him, when he was 4. And I think it's easy to see why I adopted him. He's so adorable. So he's 8 now, and he's my baby. Next, I'd like to show this picture. This is my hometown, Carver, North Carolina, the year I was born, 1953. And this gentleman here was the only policeman in town, and he didn't even have a police car. He just used his personal car. And this was Carver downtown. Anyway, this was the entire downtown, and I'm pleased to say that though the businesses are changed, the downtown is still exactly the same. 60 years later. Oh, I was going to use this to talk about my childhood. I think that every minute that I spent in Carver, North Carolina was rapturously happy. My childhood growing up was borderline insane. I was one of 7 kids, and we moved all the time. We lived like gypsies. Everything was always unsettled and sort of ugly. And every year we moved, and my mother would come in and she would gather us all in a group, and she'd say, "Okay, we're moving to insert city here." And she'd say, "Pack like you're going to the moon." And when we would leave and set out for our new home, all we would take with us for a family of 9 was what you could fit into one of those little U-Haul trailers that's about the size of a hot tub. And then when we got to wherever we were going, my parents would go to Goodwill and, furnish the place and then abandon that stuff when we left. And so it was a less than charming childhood. We put the fun in dysfunctional. My mother was a widow when I was born, and she was living with her folks in Carborough. And so I was actually born while she was living there. And the minute I popped out, my grandmother and I fell madly in love with one another. And I spent every summer with her my entire childhood. And I'd have my little suitcase packed before the end of the school year, and I'd leave the next day, and I would time my return to get back the day before school started. And 36 hours each way on a Greyhound bus. Anyway, and my grandmother's house was this oasis of tranquility and sameness. Year after year, it never changed. And when they lived in a little clapboard house, they didn't live on very much money, they didn't have a car, but when I was little I thought they were rich because they had furniture that matched and carpets on the floor and curtains on the windows. And so I felt like a fairy princess when I was there. That's Carborough, it just means the world to me. and it's what I
Favorite
consider
place.
my home. Yeah, and and I was going to add that my mother and as I said, my mother was a widow when I was born, and apparently she and my father could not get along. Very volatile relationship, and so every couple months she'd take the kids and go to her mother's and stay a couple months, and then take the kids back to New York and live with her husband for a couple months, and then just back and forth. And they were married for 10 years. And it happened that she was in North Carolina. He was 25 years older than her, and he dropped dead suddenly. And so she was in North Carolina when that happened. And when my grandmother heard that he had died, she went up to her and put her arms around her and said, "I'm so glad you were with me, dear, when it happened, or I'd always fear you killed him." The next picture, this is two of my nieces and my nephew. They live here in Denver. And this picture is actually about 5 years old. The youngest is 16, and the two oldest, who are twins, are 18, about to go to college. And they have just been the light of my life. I have enjoyed them so much. And both of their grandmothers died when they were just babies. And my grandmother was so important to me that I said, I'm going to try to step in and fill that role for them. And doing that has been a real joy for me. And what was I going to say? I was just going to tell people who have young children or have babies on the way that it goes so blindingly fast. I feel like I went to bed one night and they were 6, and I got up the next day and they were 16. And I was with them at least once a week, their whole childhood growing up. And had I known how fast it was going to go, I would have spent as much time with them as I could. And so I just want all you parents to know that and to enjoy your children while you have
has
them.
wonderful stories about these kids.
Yes. Oh yeah, I was going to tell one.
They're the best.
I was just going to say, you can enjoy them every day until they're teenagers, and then they're awful. I had great stories. I have great stories about all of them growing up, but I'll just tell one. When my nephew was about 4 maybe, I came over to babysit, and I had brought the videotape. This is showing how long ago this was, and he was so excited. He met me at the front door, and he's like, I want to watch it. And he's like trying to snatch it out of my hand. And I said, honey, let's just let your parents get out the house, get out the door, and then we'll watch the video. So he turns on his heel, and he goes running into the house yelling, we can watch it as soon as the grown-ups leave. And I said, that's pretty much the highest accolade you can have from children. So anyway, so those are my pictures.
So we have 5 questions that Laura has selected, and so we're going to start with the question that is, if you could have any job in the world, what would it be?
I've always thought that the most delightful job in the world would be to design costumes for historical movies.
Oh.
I love history, and I love the history of fashion, and so I thought, talk about not being able to wait to get up and go to work in the morning. So if I knew now what I knew then, that's what I would have pursued.
Okay, who inspires you and how are you a bit like them?
I picked Eleanor Roosevelt to answer this question. I think she was one of the finest human beings that ever lived. She was so passionate about what she believed in. And she would qualify for what we now call a liberal Democrat or an extremely liberal Democrat. And I share those values politically, and so that's the way in which I feel that I'm like her. And she was very fearless and bold and indefatigable, and those are the ways I wish I was like her, but I'm not. Just on the subject of government, she believed that government did have a responsibility to take care of the poor and the sick and the disenfranchised, and she put that into her daily life and used her prestige as First Lady to push that agenda. And I think she was the living embodiment of I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And that phrase has become a joke, but I really believe that. And my entire career, I have really felt like I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
That's true. True statement.
Yeah.
What do you think is the best feeling in the world?
Well, I think everybody knows I like to make people laugh, but what's really gratifying for me is to lift someone's mood by making them laugh. when somebody's down in the dumps.
Check. You do that. If you had unlimited money and space, what one thing would you do to your home?
I'd add a housekeeper.
Yeah, me too.
I live in a 400 square foot apartment with a housekeeper.
Okay, so you win $1 million, but you have to give half to charity. Which charity do you pick, and then what would you do with the rest of the money?
Well, I had to give this one some thought. I think it's no surprise to people that I would give it to animals. If I had to give it to one group, I would give it to the Golden Retriever Rescue of the Rockies, where I've gotten my 2 wonderful Golden Retrievers. And I would do this because I think the people associated with that organization are the closest thing we'll ever know to angels walking among us. They're just the most splendid people. If I could divide it up, I would divide it 7 ways. 7 ways. I would divide it among Golden Retriever Rescue of the Rockies, Colorado Pug Rescue, the Denver Dumb Friends League, and the Max Fund, because those are the 4 places I've gotten my pets. And I would add nationally the ASPCA, the Humane Society, and PETA.
And the other half?
Oh, the other half, yeah. Well, I would save half of the other half for myself to pay off my bills and pay for my retirement. And the other half I would split equally among my siblings. I think that because of the way we grew up, we had to be each other's best friends. And the analogy I use is we were all sitting furiously bailing in this little leaky lifeboat that was our childhood.
Clinging on to each other.
Yeah, so that's what I would do with that part.
So now we're ready for the on-the-spot question. So if you could have dinner with anyone, living or dead, who would it be and why?
Well, I'll pick one living and one dead. I think living, I would choose Barack Obama. I think he's a groundbreaker. I think he's a great American. I think he's inherited a terrible, terrible situation, and he's done the best he could with it. And I think he would just be fun to have dinner with. And it has to be in the White House. And Michelle can come if she wants. And person living or dead, I think I'd go back to Eleanor Roosevelt. I think, again, in the White House. And I think I'd like to have dinner with Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt. And I'm sitting there thinking Elizabeth I, I'm trying to think of all these people I could choose, but that's what comes to mind for me. I think
dinner in the White House, for sure.
Yeah, that much we know. This has been the Employee Spotlight with Laura